Good evening, everyone. I'm Councillor King. I would like to welcome you to this meeting of the Housing and Planning Scrutiny Select Committee. For the benefit of those watching on YouTube, members of the committee are present in the chamber, and these members will be voting on the proposals this evening. Other members of the council are also in attendance and are participating via MS Teams, and they can take part in the discussions and ask questions but cannot vote. Your attention is drawn to agenda item 1, which sets out the guidance of how meetings will be conducted, including the ground rules. Before we start with the formal business, we will confirm attendance of voting members by doing a roll call. Alison, I'll ask you if you would to introduce yourself and then introduce members, or give them the opportunity to introduce themselves. Thank you.
Firstly, I'm Alison Parris, the Principal Democratic Services Officer, and when I call you, if you can just indicate that you're present. Councillor King.
Present.
Councillor Bell.
Present.
Councillor Bridge.
Present.
Councillor Dalton.
Present.
Councillor Davis.
Present.
Councillor Hickmott.
Present.
Councillor Hood.
Present.
Councillor Oliver.
Present.
Councillor Palmer.
Present.
Councillor Roud.
Present.
We've had apologies for in-person attendance from Councillor Tanner, although I can see she's present online. Been substituted this evening by Councillor Tunstall.
Present.
Councillor Thornywell. We've received apologies from Councillor Williams, and he's substituted by Councillor Rhodes.
I'm here.
Thank you. I can confirm you have 13 voted members present this evening.
Thank you, Alison. I'd like now to introduce the officers in the chamber or online. If we could start with this end, please.
Thank you, Chair. Damien Roberts, Chief Executive.
Good evening, Eleanor Hoyle, Director of Planning, Housing and Environmental Health.
Evening members, James Bailey, Head of Planning.
Linda.
Hi everyone, Linda Hibbs, Head of Housing and Health.
Thank you. We've covered the apologies for absence that I know about. Are there any in the chamber? I don't think there would be. And we covered the substitutes. So are there any declarations of interest that members would like to offer? None offered. Thank you very much. Excuse me. I'd like to offer the minutes of the meeting held on the 21st of October 2025, attached at pages 15 to 20, to be agreed as a correct record. A printed copy of the minutes here, which I will sign if you are all happy to confirm. Thank you. Okay, we come to item 6, the first substantive item on the agenda, and this is a review of fees and charges. It will be introduced by James Bailey, Head of Planning. The recommendations are at 3.1, which are pages 21 and 22. There are 6 sub-elements to the recommendation, which I'm sure James will cover, and then we'll decide how we're going to approach that. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Good evening, members. The report updates the discretionary fees across the planning service for financial years 26-27 and would become effective on the 1st of April 2026. Fees have generally been increased by between 4 and 10% across development management and building control, with the 10% being increased across some building control areas. Some new fee categories have also been introduced, and again, these are set out in Annex 1 for development management, and obviously Annex 2 sets out the building control fees, with increases in Section 106 monitoring, and that includes a new fee for registration of Section 106 agreements, which is around £250. Fees have also been increased in line with inflation for high hedges, enforcement, and also PPAs, and the PPA fees are set out in Annex 3. The report does set out in terms of following best practice, in terms of benchmarking fees, and members are requested to agree the recommendations set out in paragraphs 3.1, that's 1 to 5. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, James. Does anyone in the chamber have any questions for James? Councillor Rhodes.
Chairman, thank you. I refer to page 33, and I'd just like to be absolutely clear on this. There we are, standing in the field, so that comes under creation of 100 or more new residential units. And then it says initial briefing by case officer to key members, which I understand. It doesn't anywhere else say further meetings, workshops, blah, 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 which of course take up officer time. So is that supposed to be in there or not, Chairman? Thank you.
James.
Could I just refer, you're referring to the Annex 1 appendix in terms of pre-application charging schedule?
Correct.
Back to you. Within subcategory, it does say in the bottom of Annex 1, please note additional fees may be incurred for the following reasons. And it does list 3 additional reasons which may incur additional fees on that basis. So I don't know if that addresses the question in terms of the Annex 1 point.
Chairman.
Thank you. Any other questions? That's good. It's quite a comprehensive set of recommendations, which, as I say, are in 6 parts. They cover pre-application charging fees, building control fees, enforcement, charging fees for SO106, S106 monitoring, high hedge fees, PPA charging schedules. Now, does anyone object to me taking all 6 of those at one time? Okay, well, I'm going to propose that we accept the recommendation. Is anyone prepared to second? Councillor Davis, thank you. So that is carried. Thank you very much. Okay. Do we agree? I beg your pardon. Yeah. Right, the next item we have is HMO and caravan site licensing fee charges 2026-27. And the report will be made by Linda Hibbs, Head of Housing, and the recommendations are 3.1, 3.2 on page 53. So, Linda.
Thank you, Chair. Just to briefly say that this report covers our fees for licensing both houses and multiple occupation and caravan sites for 2026-27. To confirm, the increases in the fees have followed the guiding principles and they're at paragraph 4.1 and represent a 4% increase across the board. Importantly for members, these fees reflect our ongoing experience of the officer time taken to carry out these activities. Thank you, Chair.
Any questions from members? Okay, well, I'm going to propose that the recommendation is accepted in both parts, 3.1 and 3.2. Is anyone prepared to second that? Thank you, Councillor Thornywell. I will now not disenfranchise you as I tried to do a moment ago, inadvertently. So are we all agreed? Thank you. The next item is the adoption of a calculator for indoor sports, outdoor sports and playing pitch developer contributions. Again, this is in 2 parts. Part 1 where we seek to adopt the Sports England calculator, and part 2, where we asked that the draft guidance notes and on the operational use of the calculator laid out in Annex 2 are noted, such that they can be forwarded to the Cabinet for further consultation. So, Eleanor, please.
Thank you, Chair. As members of the committee will recall, we discussed this area of work with you back in the summer at your meeting in July, and when we talked about the strategies for both indoor sports and outdoor sports and playing pitches. Part of the recommendations in those strategies was to have the development of a calculator to enable us to secure these contributions against that evidence base. So some work has been ongoing to look at that and to assess use of the calculator. And this report recommends that we adopt both the Sports England calculator and some associated metrics. The reason for that phrase is that the Sports England calculator doesn't cover all of the sports that are captured in our strategies, and therefore the operational note proposes the use of some additional tools to ensure that we can get contributions to that wider range of sports and facilities. That was really all I wanted to point out to members. The Annex 1, though, just to say, is obviously indicative because it is based on the draft local plan allocations. It's there for indicative purposes to give members a sense of the scale of potential contributions for indoor facilities that could come as a result of those proposed allocations. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Eleanor. Councillor Mehmet, thank you for coming along this evening. And I'm going to give you the chance to say a few words, should you wish to do so.
Thank you very much, Chairman. I'm not a member of your committee. No, just to briefly add to what Eleanor has said, it's an important piece of work that allows us to collect contributions to mitigate the effects of new development on our indoor sports provision. Basically, we do something similar already for outdoor sports. So I think it's, a very important piece of work. And I've pressed officers quite hard over the last few weeks to get this ready. And I'm very grateful that they were able to do so. So, hope that helps. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor Bridge.
Thank you, Chair. I just have a question. I noticed reading through this that in Annex 1, when it's on page 65, this Annex 1 gives a list of all the sites in the draft local plan and gives an indicative calculation of how much contributions might be. And it's based on a population for each site, based on a figure of 2.4 persons per unit. But in Annex 2, which is the draft guidance, it uses 2.3 in the example persons per unit. So there's a discrepancy there. I just wanted to clarify which one is correct. Thank you.
It's a very good spot, Councillor Bridge. Thank you very much. I don't know which one is correct. We've been using 2.4 in most of our discussions, so I believe it's that one. But what I would need to do is check the calculation in the example, because I don't know if it's just an incorrect figure or an incorrect calculation. But if it's not that way around, then we will, of course, confirm that to members before this is formally approved at Cabinet.
Thank you, Councillor Bridge. Bonus point for that. Anyone else? Okay. Well, what we have, as I said, two recommendations, one of which is the agreement to proceed with the sports calculator as the new methodology from now on. I do so propose acceptance of the recommendation on that basis. Does anyone want to second that? Councillor Dawden, thank you. Have I got general affirmation? Thank you. The second part is the noting that the finalised, this will be sent forward to Cabinet and there will be ongoing work and consultation to develop the detail behind the plan. So can I have, I'm going to so propose that again. Can I have a seconder, please? Councillor Thorneyworth, thank you very much. Thank you. Sorry, I'm doing it again. Can I have your general agreement, please? This is all going too well, I'm sure. I'm going to have to do something. Stop that. The next item is item 9, which relates to the report, which is the outcome of the review carried out by the Planning Advisory Service of the Council's Planning Service. There are a number of elements to the action plan arising from the report, and I'm going to ask Eleanor to summarise where we are before we talk about that, and I'd like to focus on as much as possible on the ongoing plan and how we make it better. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I am actually going to ask James to present this one because he was the lead officer for the review and did an incredible amount of work to get it over the line. So I'll hand over to James to carry that out, but then obviously we're both happy to take questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, members. In terms of what's on your papers, you've got the Annex 1, which sets out the final peer review. Annex 2, which sets out the DM review, because they were done in 2 parts, but obviously read together, and those 2 together form the recommendations, which form the action plan, which is set out on your papers. And the action plan sets out the recommendations from the PAS team with the required actions to meet the recommendations. And this includes the timescales for delivery and the owners of the action. I won't go into detail in terms of what the report sets out, because members would have read that in detail. It was quite an interesting in terms of review over a 3-day period. And a lot of the recommendations set out in the report, I think, are generally agreed with in terms of within the planning team, and they are recognised areas that we need to improve. But the report does also sets out areas where the team are doing well, and also sets out areas where improvement is required. And on that basis, and are set out in paragraphs 3.1, 3.2 and 3.3 of your papers, members are asked to agree the recommendations set out in those paragraphs, with an update on progress for delivery is set out in paragraph 3.3, the delivery of the actions in May 26, for a report to come back to this committee for progress on the delivery of the actions going forward. So thank you very much, members.
Thank you. Any questions on the report or the action plan per se? Councillor Thornwell.
Just some small points. I do think we need to address this as to what we're going to do from now on, rather than rehearsing things from the past. And I do note they don't like area committees, but I haven't met many planners who do like them. And I was surprised at their comments that they felt that perhaps not all members are signed up to getting a local plan. And I hope that is not the case, and that members do understand the importance of getting a local plan. And as an aside, could I just make the comment that we are supposed to be putting out a leaflet? As far as I know, it hasn't turned up in Larkfield yet, and time's running out. And I just confined my comments at this stage to that.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for your comments, Councillor Thornwell. Just in terms of the local plan leaflet, it has started to be delivered. We've had reports that it has been delivered. If there are any other parts of the borough that haven't had it yet, and you could see me after class and let me know, please, because if we need to chase up, we will. We are a bit in the hands of Royal Mail with that, but the leaflets are all out there with them ready to be delivered. But if we need to follow anything up, then we will. Thank you.
Councillor Taylor.
Thank you very much, Chair. I'm not a member of your committee. I did want to pick up on the point of the PAS review, which I thought was a very good review, about the lack of trust. And we can talk about it further, but we really do need to address this lack of trust issues and bring officers and members together facing in the same direction. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Taylor. Councillor Hickmott.
Well, personally, I do trust the officers. I think over the years we've had some really good planning officers. I haven't always agreed with their opinions or their views, but I think the people that we got, not only now but in the past, have been very good. So I'm quite happy with that. I didn't like the idea of getting away with area committees. I think that will be a weakness, but we are going to be superseded by a great big conglomerate. So I thought the point of R7 on page 118 about community engagement, talking with parish and town councils, I hope, is one that we ought to push, because if we end up with this massive, great, whatever it might be, the local views, and if we end up with these planning committees that are strategic and probably haven't got a local member on, and not local views, and it won't be heard and they're going to be ignored. So I just hope that we pick that point up and push it forward.
Councillor Hood.
Yeah, thank you very much, Chair. The document, the report makes very interesting reading. It talks about the members' lack of faith in the planning system. I think there is a huge lack of faith in the planning system as we have it. But I don't think it's a lack of faith in officers. I think it's the system. I think it's the fact that we are frustrated that we have got an NPPF which doesn't make a lot of sense, and especially with the recent changes. And I'm sure you'll agree with that, Chair. I think that officers have got a difficult job because they are overworked, and I think that the report reads as if members are kind of an annoyance or a hindrance or something like that. I'm not sure that is the case. I think we understand that it is more complex bringing things to the planning committees, and some of the planning committees bring more work than others, which is odd. I think I'm relieved rather that we haven't got a recommendation to get rid of the planning committee, the area planning committees that I could detect in there. And obviously we are a time limited organisation, it seems. But I just picking up on the comments of Councillor Hickmott there. If we do go into the brave new world of a unitary council, and we only have one planning committee across that entire area, we have got the prospect of councillors from as far away as Swanley, Walderslade, Hawkhurst and Lenham potentially making decisions about what happens in Tunbridge, which I find pretty horrific. So yeah, I certainly hope that we don't see a proposal coming down the road to meddle with something that I believe works very well. I think the 3 area committees, the level of engagement by members in those committees is extremely high, and I think if we're talking about trust, I think messing with that and destroying the relationship between your local the local members and the decision making in the planning system would be regrettable.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Hood, thank you for all of your comments. Just the one thing to pick up on what members have been saying about potential changes coming through LGR. The other set of potential changes is the national scheme of delegation. Members of the committee will remember we obviously put together a response on your behalf that was endorsed by this committee to the consultation. So some of those changes might happen, and they might happen sooner. I would strongly suggest that they will happen sooner than LGR. So we might be forced to make some changes to our system, but that won't be something that officers propose off our own. That will be absolutely on the back of government guidance, and then there will need to be a very detailed and frank conversation with members about how we respond to that and how we implement it appropriately ahead of LGR if we are required to.
Thank you. Anita, you've got your hand up.
Yes, I have. Thank you for letting me speak. I'm not a member of your committee. I've been through this report quite carefully, and first of all, I was so I'd just like to bring up a few points really. The Annex 1 R6 planning software transfer agile to iDocs. I think members should also have been mentioned in being involved in that. There's very little, although I thought it was quite negative about members. I know it sort of mentions that members are sceptical about the relationship with planners, but you know, they've not done much positive work to get us included really. So I'd just make the point, that's the first point I'd like to make about the iDocs, and members do have a relationship with Agile stroke iDocs with the lists of planning applications that we get every week, and we don't have a link to any of those applications on the present system. I wonder about R12, what input any area planning committee chairman had in that. Then there's page 122, 4.4. I thought that was a paragraph of very interesting statistics gathered together in the same place for the first time, as far as I'm concerned. One stat that's missing, though, and doesn't seem to be apparent throughout, is I'd like to have seen the number of appeals upheld that were as a result of member decisions, as opposed to officer decisions, because I think that's fairly fundamental, and they're very quick to point out the 311,000 that was awarded against the council. We don't have to name names, but I do think it's a bit skewed towards officers, and I believe that amount was as a result of officer decisions. As for saying about officers' reports are too detailed because of members being forensic sort of in their approach, we're told all the time that without a local plan, members don't have a leg to stand on in respect of going against any decisions, and that developers will have a field day, and you know, it's no wonder every application's looked at so forensically, because we don't want to lose our open countryside areas, which are under threat because of this. So you know, members are doing a fantastic job, I think, in making sure that they know about the planning detail, but officers seem quite intimidated by this. So I was a bit sad about that. And then moving on, 5.2, I didn't have the page number, that we need a heritage officer post, and perhaps even an urban design officer and a landscape officer. Well, you know, if we need those posts, we should have had them. That's 3 posts. They're probably difficult to recruit to, they always are. But if it's thought that we need those posts, I think we ought to go after that and you know, actually try and get them. So I think that would be really good. And then Annex 2, performance management, talks about validation of planning application delays not monitored in KPIs. Why not? They're monitored everywhere else, and I hope we're going to address that as well. So all in all, a fairly thorough report, but with bits missing, and I was surprised it wasn't directed more with a happier view of members, really. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Oakley. A few things to pick up there. One is that the recommendations in the report are directly from the PAS team, so they took their input from everybody that they spoke to during the time. So members were involved in that review. Our proposed actions are what are then in the action plan at member 2 and up for discussion this evening. So if I think any of the responses to the recommendations aren't what they need to be, then this is absolutely the opportunity to collect those views from you and make any changes. In terms of appeal statistics, we will take that away and break down the information further for you. With regards to officers' reports, again, that is PAS's view, working on the basis of what they see as good practice from their reviews and their work across the country. And that would suggest that our reports are currently very detailed by comparison to the majority of planning authorities. I absolutely accept everything you said about the particular situation we find ourselves in, but in terms of the development management review, that's their advice, is that we look at ways to streamline those reports, and that's not necessarily just cutting swathes of information out. It's about potentially providing more contextual information to members in a different way on an ongoing basis. So that's got a specific action in the action plan. You picked up about the staffing proposals. James and I are discussing how we move that forward and whether any of those particular needs can be met sooner or on an interim basis through, for example, extension of some of the partnerships we already have in place with other authorities who have roles that exist that might have capacity that they could offer us more time than we already have with them, as I say, on an interim basis while we're looking at the structure. So that is all underway. And in terms of the validation of planning applications, that is a KPI we're going to be proposing for 26-27 to include in the formal monitoring that comes to members. And just to reassure members, we do already monitor that very closely informally in service. So if there are any fluctuations in that, we seek to pick those up. Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Hood.
Yeah, I just want to. I agree with Councillor Oakley about the need to have a conservation officer. I find it. I think it's quite odd that we've got so many conservation areas, so many listed buildings, but we don't have a dedicated resource for that. I've just got a query about the landscape officer. We've got a tree and landscape officer, Mr. Jones, and I know he's really busy, but we have got a landscape officer. Is it normal? Is half of the problem with the workload for Mr. Jones that actually he's doing 2 jobs when he should be doing 1? Is that, because that would explain a lot, and that's why we've brought in additional resource from elsewhere. As regards to the detail of the reports, I think that detail is appreciated by members. I certainly wouldn't want to see any less detail in there, but when the report talks about members being forensic, we want to see the detail. We're not trying to catch officers out. That detail is really, really useful, and presentations that go with them as well. The illustrations, the way that the applications are presented is excellent. I wouldn't want to see any detriment to that at all.
Just to come back on the point in terms of the tree and landscape officer role. I mean, he does have a busy caseload. Members see sometimes the application numbers on a monthly report. He averages 80 applications on a caseload, so he has a high caseload. In terms of the actual role, whilst it is called tree and landscape, just for members, it doesn't actually comment on sort of detailed. If you've got an LVIA proposals, he's around, if there are conditions in terms of landscaping, in terms of the required, and the officer needs assistance in terms of identifying, approving them to make sure we get the right teams in the right place. So, the officer does have a high caseload. He also deals with requests for TPOs. That's not that's a function that the council offers. Not every council decides to go down that route. So that's a resource that goes into the tree officer, and members of this committee did agree to external funding on that to sort of manage the case officer's caseload. But I think generally he does have an extremely high caseload. So where we're looking in that, and that's, there are lots of trees in the borough. We've got lots of TPOs. There are requests here to review TPO orders as well as an ongoing commitment. And they all cost time and money. So I think it's something that we need to take account of in terms of what work is prioritised, what work the tree and landscape officer carries out, and that's going to be part of our considerations going forward in terms of priorities. But I think it is very well recognised that the tree officer has an extremely high caseload, and we need to prioritise that at the current time to manage that expectation going forward.
Thank you, Chair. And if I could just on conservation, just to be clear, we have always had a dedicated resource. Well, we previously had a dedicated resource at Tunbridge Wells. That service had worked well for a long time after we weren't able to recruit to an officer, and we've now moved that to Sevenoaks due to changes. We will absolutely look at an in-house option, but we have always had a resource available. Whether there's been enough of that resource is a more detailed question and a different question, but we've never been without the ability to get conservation advice and to access more in agreement with one of our partner councils should we need to.
Councillor Mehmet.
Thank you, Chairman. Still not a member of your committee, so thank you for letting me speak. I think I take quite an interest in sort of planning matters. From past experience, it's a bit of a thankless job being a planning officer. There's high expectations from everyone and very high workloads. But as I said before, it's one of the most critical functions the council has because it impacts the most amount of residents. It's something that most amount of residents care about, and the decisions that planning officers make and the recommendations that pass the committee often result in permanent changes to our borough. These things are irreversible. So I think it's important that we look at the kind of the PAS review quite closely and look for ways to kind of improve it. I think the two critical things for me in the action plan are, I think rebuilding member officer relationships is really important, and trying to get a better understanding between both officers and members of what members' expectations are, particularly on sort of designs and the standard that they want coming forward for development. And I think at some Area 1 planning committees over the last couple of years, it's that's sort of played out where schemes have been brought to us that haven't really met those expectations. And I think if we can, nobody really wants to have that in a public facing Area 1 planning committee. And if the foundations are laid a little bit better, and sort of officers understand a bit more about what's important to everyone in their sort of respective areas, then maybe that would go a bit smoother in future. I think we've got a new head of DM who started recently, but I haven't seen an introductory kind of email from him. So without wanting to kind of scare him off, it would be good to kind of start with that maybe and sort of build that relationship in the new year maybe. I also agree quite strongly with sort of the other concerns about the lack of heritage and design and landscape expertise. I appreciate we've got contract arrangements, but I don't think it's really a substitute for having someone sat in the office with the team who you can go to and show them something. And the amount of hours we've got through this resource probably isn't sufficient to kind of cope with the kind of the workload that we're seeing, the range of things that we need this advice on. And I think it's only going to get worse with the sort of the recent changes to planning rules. We're going to get more applications where this kind of expert advice is all the more critical. So, when I look at the kind of the timeframes for all this, it's a shame that, I appreciate officers are very busy with a lot of other work, local plan stuff, but some of these action points, sort of concluding towards the end of next year, by the time, there was an ability to maybe get more staff resource in, for example, you're almost looking at LGR at that point, and that's another kind of year and a half of applications that, are going to maybe not be looked at as well in that period. So it's a difficult one, and I hope, there are some good actions in here, and I hope they can be effective and maybe improving things as quickly as possible for everyone. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I'd just like to take the opportunity to offer my own personal perspective. I think the reference to the three planning area committees was just the author venting. I don't think they actually linked in any way to any of the symptoms. So I think that was just a particular statement he wanted to include. What I understand the frustration. I understand the confusion sometimes. I'm not sure I quite identify with the forensic bit because I wish we were sometimes. But I understand why the officers may feel threatened. And I think that's a challenge for us to have better communications and better mutual understanding of why we're approaching things in a particular way. So that's what I think is the challenge. But it did strike me that the fact was noted that 98% of planning decisions are made by delegated authority. And that sort of does suggest quite a lot of trust on our part, doesn't it? And that the area committees, I think, were about 9 in the last 6 months. So these are often many of them quite small applications. So it isn't as though we're trying to boil the ocean or trying to sort of push against the tide or anything, but it is an area where the frustration comes out because it's the contact we have with officers. I think what we're trying to need to do is to have better early communication if we have issues, and that might prevent call-ins, or it might help us to understand how we construct our arguments. So I think that's the challenge. So I think that's the way forward. We've got to do it is to act better perspective, better communication all round. I'm going to hand over to Damien, but we'll come back because there are a couple of minor amendments that I'd like to propose to the action plan itself. So over to you, Damien.
Thank you, Chair. And I just really to build on what you've just said. First of all, thank you to the members of this committee for the questions that you've asked and the comments that you've given today. I think you've given this report a really thorough going over. I just wanted to offer you a perspective. So this is a result of a peer challenge called a PAS review. It's unfortunate that in local government, less councils seem to be prepared to subject themselves to this process. And this process is only really undertaken by councils who are committed to continuous improvement because they're inviting external challenge. So it's a credit to you and it's a credit to the planning service that they have put themselves forward for this at a time when many councils aren't bothering. I think the review has been effective. It's offered that external challenge and it's identified areas for improvement, which is exactly what the planning service wanted. But I think most importantly, and this is unusual in the reviews that I've had a number of peer reviews and PAS reviews in the councils I've worked with, and I've also led a number of these reviews in other councils. And it is unusually positive. And I think that's the bit I want to focus on, is that it is demonstrating that the planning service, your planning service, has been on a journey, been on a difficult journey. Councillor Hood put his finger on it, that the national planning policy framework that we have to operate in is incredibly challenging, my goodness. And if it feels difficult, well, it's not surprising it's difficult. But what this report shows is you have a planning service that has gone on from strength to strength, that has had difficulties with recruitment, has had significant turnover, has suffered from a setback in many areas of its performance, but through sheer hard work and determination has clawed its way back and now has levels of performance that other councils would be really jealous of. Right now, I think in many parts of the countries, planning services are failing. Our planning service, I think, is on a upward trajectory, demonstrates a significant improvement, and I think is committed to further improvement ahead. It's a credit to Eleanor and James and the rest of the team, and I'm incredibly grateful for all of their hard work in getting us to this position. So thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Coming back to the action plan itself, I'd like to propose a slight amendment to recommendation 3, which is to do with rebuilding member officer relationships. It says that the proposed recommendation will be worked with the development manager and team leaders, and they will develop a programme of workshop sessions via their meetings to discuss, and also will be discussed with area planning chairs. I want to add for that to include vice chairs. Okay, I'd like to propose that. If we got a seconder, thank you, Councillor Hood. Are we all agreed? Thank you. And then I'd like to move on to R5, which is the pre-application service. And it says that the review will be undertaken by relevant staff with specific actions implemented for new financial year. And I'd like to add that that also includes the Cabinet Member for Planning and the Chairman of this committee. All agreed? Thank you. So unless anyone else has got any more questions, I think we move on to the recommendations themselves. Thank you. Under 3.1, we are asked to note the contents of the Planning Advisory Service and review report, including the recommendations for actions, and recommend to Cabinet that they endorse this report. I so propose. Seconder, please. Councillor Dawton. Agreed? Thank you. 3.2 is that we endorse the proposed action plan for delivering on the PAS review recommendations and recommend to Cabinet that this is adopted, including the two amendments that we've just agreed. I so propose. Councillor Davis seconds. Are we agreed? Thank you. And 3.3 is to note the proposed timescales in the action plan and agree that progress will be reported back to this committee in May 2026. When it comes to it, I will ask for that to be put into the work programme, and if we can report back earlier, we will. So thank you for that. Could I so propose, and can I have a seconder, please? Councillor Dawton. Oh. Sorry, Sue. Are we agreed? Thank you. The next item is the infrastructure funding statement, and it was planned that this would be presented by Chelsea Honeyfield Bradfield, but I think Eleanor is going to step in. Thank you. Pardon, it's James.
Thank you, Chair. The infrastructure funding statement sets out the infrastructure delivery and contributions collected by the council and allocations made within the monitoring period of 24-25. So it's effectively monitoring period a year gone by. So it also sets out the projects delivered over this period and new agreements entered into with an outline of contributions secured over the accounting period. The report stands on its own and sets out effectively what we have agreed and secured, and members asked to agree the recommendations set out in paragraphs 3.1 of the report. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. I have Councillor Palmer.
Thank you, Chair. Chelsea's done an awful lot of work on this report, and I know that she does do it. And I'm now gonna nitpick. I'm sorry. Page 181. Let you get there.
Sorry, Councillor Palmer, is that in one of the annexes?
Annex
2?
It's Annex 2.
Because they don't come up with the same.
Yes, sorry, Annex 2.
And in Annex 2, thank you.
Yeah, it's the grid pink lines, the developer contributions, analysis of balance held, receipts and spend. Yep, got that one. Okay, 5 from the bottom, there's the old Dairy Maidstone Road plat. Now, can I just say, I spend a lot of time each year putting in a new report for Chelsea on projects that Platt would like to do and getting quotes every year. In this particular item here, open space contribution, great. Labourn Lake seems to be mentioned in almost every other spend site, on almost every other line going down. So I think Labourn Lane seems to be getting quite a lot of contributions. Village Green Potash Lane, I've never heard of it. There is a Potash Lane. There's no Village Green. It's only private land down Potash Lane. There is a little square triangle. Oh, no, square triangle. There's a little triangle of grass that they call a green, but I'm not sure who's put that in as a site. St Mary's Platt, King George's Field. I did update that this year and said that actually we'd not had any contribution. The parish council just had to do the work. That was taken out because we just had to get into our reserves to do it. We couldn't wait any longer. And Stonehouse Field. It says at the very final column, scheme to be identified. We have had it on our plan for probably 3 years at least, and the parish council this very evening is discussing a new quote of £64,000 for recreation equipment that we've had to take some down because it's safety reasons, and we've desperately just got to go there. £20,000 would take a nice bite out of that 64, and Platt has never had a 106 contribution. So I'm not quite sure why the scheme is still to be identified when we have been putting it into our report. And can I also say, each year we are supposed to actually produce new quotes for each of these projects. And quite frankly, people are getting fed up of producing quotes that they know we are not going to have the money to do, and we are hoping to get some contribution from 106. They don't want to quote anymore. So I'm not sure. I mean, it's only going to go up by X% each year. So I'm not sure why we actually have to go to people and ask for new quotes every year when we renew our sign, when we renew our report. Sorry to go on, but I'm sure there's other people who've got lines in here, but that was just one I know specifically. Thank you.
So taking your last point first, if I could, Councillor Palmer, the parish infrastructure statements, which are the documents, they are something that we've developed over the last few years in partnership with the parishes, and a huge thank you to everyone who's been involved in that process, because I think it's had some really good outcomes. I absolutely take that feedback on board. Let James and I discuss it with Chelsea, because actually that might have been a provision that we put in at the start that felt like it was the appropriate thing to do. And actually, if it's becoming too onerous, then we might just need to look at the guidance we put into that process and think about how we can manage that better and potentially look at a percentage uplift. So I think that's a point really well made. The purpose column on this sheet will have been pulled from the Section 106 agreement. So that might be why there's a range of things. And this was for the previous one. Some of these are in the previous financial year. So it could be that those schemes were still live at the point at which this was produced, hence why they were in the Section 106. And often multiple schemes are named, or there's a cascade put in there around which sites might receive contributions. So at this point, I think the scheme might not have been identified, but we will absolutely pick the specific point up with Chelsea and make sure that progress is made on the scheme identified by the parish council.
Councillor Dalton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Question really generally, with these 106 agreements that have been in place for many, many years, and I'm particularly talking about one in Walden, there is a sum of money for maintenance of sports equipment, currently about £19,500 in the pot, but it's been there for a few years, and it was from the Oldfield Drive development, which has been there 20 plus years. What happens to that money if we go to a unitary? Is that money lost?
No, is the short answer. The contributions are tied to the permission and the land. So if that's what they were collected for, and I think in terms of those sort of ones, Councillor Dalton, it's usually that we've got them over a period of time in which we can use them for maintenance, then that remains the same. So contributions on this list where they're identified against a scheme and have particular provisions can't simply be swept up for something else, because they've already been identified and agreed and a Section 106 signed by all parties.
That's great, thank you.
Councillor Hood.
Yeah, I've got a question about the allocation of money from former teen and 20 club. The money there, £17,000, seems to have been allocated to the Medway Riverside route in its entirety. Is that? I hope that's not right. I hope that sum of money has been safeguarded for the public realm work at River Lawn itself, rather than sucked up by the wider scheme. I can just have clarity on that.
The Medway Riverside route scheme covers the whole route, including that section, but that money is specifically identified for works in the River Lawn area, and that's the specific wording of the section 106. So it's covered under that general provision, but it absolutely is a specific phase.
Thank you very much.
James, I have a question. As you know, myself and Councillor Atwell were part of the S106 monitoring group. Perhaps we need to give more visibility to that group and to enable members to funnel their questions in advance through us or yourself, so that these questions actually don't become so pressing, or they get answered or resolved. Should we think about that?
Certainly, that's very reasonable process to go through, and certainly we can have a discussion on the best way to deliver that and feedback question. Yep.
Any other questions? Thank you. Then I'd like to move to recommendation 3.1 on page 160. The recommendation asks that we endorse the infrastructure funding statement and associated documents and recommend its publication by the end of December for approval by the Cabinet Member for Transformation and Infrastructure. So I so propose. Can I have a seconder, please? Councillor Davies, thank you. Are we all agreed? Thank you. Right, the next item is the Authority Monitoring Report 24/25. I'm going to ask James to speak on this subject. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Similarly to the IFS, this reports on the financial years 24/25 and outlines the Council's latest monitoring report and reviews the effectiveness of the Council's planning policies and helps to ensure that progress is being made towards achieving the objectives set out in the suite of adopted development plan documents. The AMR also reports on progress made in preparing documents set out in our local development scheme, which has recently been updated, and action taking in regards to the duty to cooperate. So therefore, on that basis, members are asked to agree the recommendations set out in paragraphs 3.1 of the report. And again, the AMR is a statutory requirement that councils have to report on progress made in terms of advance of the development plan and how effective what I would call our aged local plan and the monitoring periods that we have on that. And obviously you will note that a lot of the monitoring reports for the current adopted local plan are aged to that effect, maybe not as relevant today as maybe a newly adopted local plan and monitoring of that would be. So, thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Do we have any questions on this rather weighty document? Councillor Hood.
Thank you very much, Chair. Yeah, on page 202, it's very reassuring to see the details relating to duty to cooperate. I'm sure that Councillor Thornywell will be delighted to know that everything's being recorded in minute detail. I think the figures when it comes to housing completions, they kind of illustrate how far we are away from the target that we're looking for, and that we are very much within the hands of the developers in all of this. Sometimes I just look at the local plan system, and I look at the number of schemes that have been we've recently, or not recently, since I've joined the council. The first ever planning application I think I was asked to vote on was the one behind North Kent College. That's never been built out. We've got numerous examples the River Centre car park. When's that ever going to happen? It's kind of, it just seems to me sometimes that the local plan is just a means to an end of allowing developers to pick and choose, and they're going to start picking the schemes that the sites that we're just making available to them that are going to be much more profitable for them to develop on the greenfield sites, and they're just going to leave these kind of brownfield sites on their own. I just find it depressing just seeing how far behind and realizing just how few levers we've got to actually force those developers who own those land banked areas.
Any other questions? Okay, before we come back to James, I'd like to endorse a lot of what you say, really, because the premise of the strategy from Downing Street is the fact that we hear about it's down to planning committees. If only we had that power. And as I said, alluded to earlier, the actual access to planning applications is fairly small, and we are not and can't conceivably be seen to be a barrier to either approvals or completions. So it's a completely bogus assumption, but it is where we are. James.
I just wanted to raise the issue that Mark raised in terms of housing land supply, which is a good point to raise in terms of housing delivery. And I just wanted to relate that to the kind of Reg 18 plan, because in terms of housing delivery, you've got to come up with a plan, and this is what the government expects, that you're going to meet that accelerated need. The government recognise that it's an accelerated growth rate that you're having. 1,097 dwellings a year far exceeds almost double of what we've recently been delivering on the last financial year, which is 689. So it's a massive jump, but I think what you've had to look at is how your spatial strategy has evolved to enable you to hopefully meet a target, which generally, as you're right, is outside of your control. But there are levers within your control that members do have, and that is sort of moving forward with a spatial strategy that has a combination of sites, different sizes, different types, because obviously much bigger housing sites take slower to get off the ground. Smaller housing sites can be delivered quicker because it's dependent on the house builder. So I just wanted to relate the issues that you do have in your control that we have looked at as part of the local plan spatial strategy that we've incorporated in this Reg 18 at the current time, which seeks a more even distribution. I know there are difficult decisions to make and to take going forward, but having that spatial strategy enables that housing delivery to be quicker moving forward, and also having an up-to-date local plan means that you can deliver those applications because the principle of development has already been established. If we go out to have a confirmed local plan for those sites that are in the local plan, the principle of development is already established. So therefore, debates around principles are not had, shouldn't be had, because they're in a local plan. So that gives further security around deliverability and speed for deliverability, because these are very challenging figures. And I think every local authority across the country is in the same position, especially down here in the south and our counterparts, that we're having to deliver exponential growth. And, you know, we have to justify through the housing delivery test if we're not going to meet it. So the importance really is having a plan that puts you in a good position to enable that to at least happen. And that's where I feel that, and you've had the, you know, to go out to the Reg 18 consultation, that's what I think this local plan seeks to do. It has a mix of allocations across the borough, which do enable a speedier delivery. And if we're successful in getting and adopting the plan, then that gives further assurity to developers to submit applications without having to look at principles. So I just wanted to add that. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Any other questions? Okay, well, we can move on to recommendation 3.1 on page 184. The recommendation is for the authority monitoring report to be endorsed by this committee and then be approved by the Cabinet Member for Planning to enable the authority monitoring report to be published on the Council's website by the end of December 2025. I will so move. Can I have a seconder, please? Thank you, Councillor Thornewell. Are we all agreed? Thank you. We come on to the Cabinet Member for Planning's report, but something I omitted to do earlier was to say that I'm pleased that Mike Taylor is well enough to speak to us online this evening. So thank you for being here, Mike, and would you like to carry on and do your report? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chairman, and thanks for the kind wishes. I want to thank Eleanor first off for the excellent preamble to my report. Think of this as an appendix. I've long complained about the erosion of democracy in our planning system, some mandated by government, some from within this authority. We've tried to redress some of these issues. It is clear that government may impose new restrictions, but as Matt says, business as usual until it isn't. There's been a vast improvement in member engagement in the local plan process, and I thank the officers for all the extra work this has made for them. Although earlier knowledge of site allocations could allay a lot of that necessary anxiety. We now also have a strong suite of planning policies. Early member engagement with large applications should prove a real benefit, ensuring that bad applications do not surprise us at the start of the consultation process. This will reduce public concerns and the risk of refusals and appeals. The past review team suggested this could be extended to parishes as well, but obviously there's confidentiality issues. Good work has been done to redress the excessive delays in updating the conservation area appraisals. The proposed conservation statements should give us quick fix protection for the most vulnerable areas. It's clear we cannot change the 21-day rule for parish submissions. It's laid down in law. But I do believe that we can change the member call-in 21-day restriction to give proper public and parish discussion and voting on contentious issues that could lead to a call-in. If an application is called into committee, it will delay the process anyways. So I do not think it matters at what point in that process a call-in occurs. And I feel that 5 weeks gives a good window, still within the minimum 8-week deadline for determination. I'm still trying to get the necessary constitutional amendments made. I was also grateful to officers for amending the non-amendment policy. The non-amendment policy was introduced to prevent developers introducing substantial amendments after the consultation period. But this backfired on us because it also prevented reasonable developers introducing amendments that made applications more acceptable. Whilst the Constitution has a fudged amendment to automatically allow application to go to committee if the chair and DPHEH cannot agree, I don't think this resolves the underlying issue. The elected members of the planning authority, not the officers. Whilst we may automatically delegate 98% of all decisions to officers, the authority to set a committee agenda allowing a call-in should be the decision of the chair, not the planning department. The past review highlights the lack of trust between members and officers, and it is the attitudes highlighted above that drives that regrettable mistrust. It is also true that whilst we still seek to control development, the officer's job is to manage development, and that generates tension and lack of trust. But trust is a two-way street. We have to be able to trust that officers' advice will be honest and complete. They need to be assured that we will not abuse that trust. This needs a lot of extra work. And finally, my apologies to any members whose local plan public meetings I've been forced to miss through ill health. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Mike. Does anyone in the chamber wish to make any comments on Mike's monologue? Thank you. Councillor Thornwell.
Just to put on record how good it was to have both Matt and the cabinet member at our public meeting in East Malling.
Thank you. Anybody wish to respond from the top table? No? Thank you. Okay, we'll move on to the work programme. As I say, one item has arisen as a result of the need to report back on progress on the action plan arising from the PAS report. That will be entered into the work programme. The objective meeting being to report back by May 2026 or sooner. With regard to another item, there have been a number of recent discussions with housing associations, which have been quite illuminating, interesting, and other adjectives. But what the feeling is that I share is that we as members need to understand more about how the housing associations are positioned for the challenges that we're going to be facing them with, particularly in the next years ahead. So Eleanor and I thought it was a good idea to invite the Kent Downs Housing Group. Is that the title?
It's the Kent Housing Group, which is the sort of almost membership body that our officers belong to, and many developers and registered providers, and one of their steering committee who has significant experience in this area and advises a lot of local authorities. We thought could give quite a good overview of that. So the proposal is, with the committee's approval, that we will invite him to a meeting at some point in 2026.
Does everyone agree to that idea as being fairly good? Councillor Hood.
I think it's a very good idea. I think it would be good to get them in earlier rather than later. I'm always mindful that when we give planning consent and there's any element of affordable housing in there, that I'm worried about finding a registered provider that will actually take it on, especially when there's smaller numbers.
Point taken. Linda is going to take away the action to try and arrange the meeting and agree with myself that it will be as soon as possible. So point taken. Thank you very much. Any other suggestions for the work programme? Thank you.
Yeah, there's a matter of the active travel plan, which I raised at the Joint Transportation Board. I'm not quite sure where that should come, whether it should come. I've repeatedly asked for an active travel working group, cross-party member and officer, which I think would be better attached to JTB, but it needs to go in that document needs to be discussed and presented at a committee, either this committee or that committee.
I remember you mentioned this before, and I'm as puzzled now as I was then as to where the right place would be. So any advice, Eleanor?
Well, firstly, to say that the active travel strategy is out to public consultation as part of the local plan. So that's how it's being dealt with at present. And so would be subject to the same officer member working groups as other policy areas in the local plan. I have discussed this with Councillor Mehmet in his portfolio as infrastructure, with the infrastructure part of his portfolio, and I think we've agreed that we'll look at an option to have what the initial proposal was a member officer workshop around active travel, and to develop the appropriate mechanisms from there. Mindful that obviously there's the ongoing local plan process as well, so we need to make sure it's working to those timescales so we can pick that up outside of the meeting.
Thank you. If there are no other suggestions for work programme, I'll move on. Thank you. Item 14 is urgent items. I don't believe there are any. Alison? There are none. Thank you. There are no matters for consideration in private. So I will move on to close the meeting at 08:45, and thank you for your cooperation and good night.